I was never loved, said the Omega. The Alpha King stepped close and answered. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Emily Hunter stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes lowered, unable to meet the gaze of the onlookers who had gathered for the grand ceremony. The Moonspire Temple was filled with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of burning candles and whispered gossip. The night sky outside was clear, the full moon casting its pale light through the high windows, illuminating the ornate stonework of the temple. It was a night that should have been filled with hope, but for Emily, it was a cruel reminder of everything she had never had. As the other Omegas were selected, one by one, Emily felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She had never been chosen, not in the way she had hoped. The whispers behind her back, the stares, the pity, it was all too much to bear. She had been told her scent was too faint, her presence too weak. In a world where strength and dominance ruled, she was nothing more than a shadow, overlooked and forgotten. Her family had abandoned her long ago, her pack had rejected her, and now, in front of the entire pack, she stood alone. She's not worthy, one of the voices in the crowd muttered. A broken Omega, just like the others. Emily felt the sting of the words, but she kept her head down, unwilling to show the tears that threatened to spill. She had never felt so small, so invisible. Her heart ached as the Alpha Kings and powerful Betas made their choices, each of them walking away with their selected mate, leaving Emily to wonder if she would ever know what it was like to be loved. The ceremony dragged on, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Just as she thought she might break under the pressure, she felt something shift in the air. The crowd grew silent. All eyes turned to the entrance, and there, standing tall and commanding, was the Alpha King. Jackson Blackwood. The Alpha King, renowned for his ruthless power and unyielding control, entered the temple like a force of nature. His presence alone seemed to freeze time. His piercing blue eyes swept over the crowd, taking in the scene before him. He was a sight to behold, with a strong, muscular build and a demeanor that demanded respect. His reputation preceded him, but there was something different in his gaze as he looked across the room. The moment his eyes landed on Emily, something inside her shifted. For the first time that night, she felt seen. He didn't look at her with disdain, nor did he pity her. His gaze was intense, focused, as if he could see straight through her. He took a step forward, his powerful frame making its way through the crowd with ease. The whispers grew louder, but Jackson paid them no mind. Emily's breath caught in her throat as he walked toward her, his steps slow but deliberate. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as he came to a stop in front of her. The silence was deafening, the weight of the moment too much to bear. Without a word, he reached out, his large hand gently tilting her chin upward so that their eyes met. For a moment, everything else faded away. The crowd, the whispers, the pain, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the connection that sparked between them in that instant. You are not broken, Jackson said, his voice low and steady. You are mine. His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a promise that Emily could hardly believe. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never known before, hope. Jackson Blackwood, the Alpha King, had claimed her. And in that moment, Emily realized that everything she had suffered, all the rejection, the loneliness, had led her to this moment of redemption. She was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was loved. The room was still silent as Jackson's words hung in the air, the weight of them settling over Emily like a comforting blanket. Her heart raced in her chest, each beat a reminder of the overwhelming rush of emotions she felt. For so long, she had been invisible to the world, dismissed as nothing more than an outsider in a world that valued power and strength. But here, in front of everyone, Jackson had seen her. He had claimed her. She could hardly comprehend it. The Alpha King, the most powerful figure in the land, had chosen her, the Omega who had been rejected by everyone else. You are mine, he had said, his voice filled with authority and something else, something she couldn't quite place. She could feel the sincerity in his words, the promise they carried. He wasn't just speaking out of obligation or pity, he was speaking as if he truly meant it. His hand remained on her chin, his touch gentle but firm, as though grounding her in that moment. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It was as if a part of her that had been frozen in time was finally waking up. She hadn't realized how much she had longed for this feeling, being seen, being valued until now. Slowly, as if still in disbelief, she lifted her gaze to meet his. Jackson's piercing blue eyes locked with hers, and for a brief moment, everything else faded away. The whispers of the crowd, the lingering doubts, the years of rejection, they no longer mattered. All that mattered was the connection between them. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Jackson's expression softened, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of the vulnerability that lay beneath his confident exterior. "Because you are not like the others," he said, his voice low and steady. "You have a strength that the others cannot see. A strength that comes from within, not from what they expect of you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had spent her entire life being told she was weak, that she would never measure up to the standards of the pack, that her Omega status was a burden. But Jackson's words, though simple, were the first real affirmation she had ever received. He saw her in a way no one else had. "You are not broken, Emily," he continued, his hand now gently resting on her shoulder. "You are everything I need. And I will never let you feel alone again." His words, soft yet firm, filled her with a sense of peace she had never known. 4. The first time in her life, Emily felt truly seen, not as a burden, not as a rejected Omega, but as someone worthy of love and protection. The crowd around them had begun to murmur, but Emily hardly noticed. Jackson was the only one who mattered in that moment. His presence was like a beacon, pulling her out of the darkness and into the light. She didn't know what the future held, or what challenges they would face together, but one thing was clear, for the first time in her life, she had a place. She had a purpose. And most importantly, she had someone who cared. Jackson's gaze never wavered from hers as he took a step back, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "Come," he said softly. "Let's go." As they walked toward the exit of the temple, Emily's heart swelled with emotions she could hardly put into words. The world outside had never seemed so full of possibility. No longer would she walk in the shadows, unnoticed and unloved. Jackson had chosen her, and with that choice came a promise. A promise that she would never be alone again. Emily could hardly believe the events that had unfolded, the feeling of Jackson's presence beside her as they left the Moonspire Temple still fresh in her mind. The cool night air brushed against her skin as they stepped outside, the sounds of the ceremony now distant echoes. The full moon shone high above, its light bathing everything in a silvery glow, but it was Jackson's warmth that enveloped her. The people who had once rejected her, the ones who had whispered cruelly about her fate, were nothing more than distant memories now. She was walking beside the Alpha King, the most powerful figure in the land, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged. As they made their way through the temple grounds, Jackson kept a steady pace, his presence commanding but comforting. His broad shoulders seemed to take up all the space around them, and despite his undeniable strength, there was a calmness to him that made Emily feel safe. She glanced up at him, her heart still racing from the earlier moment. She had never imagined that someone like him could see something in her, that he could look past her flaws and see the person she had always known. She could be. "Are you all right?" Jackson's voice, soft yet powerful, broke through her thoughts. She nodded quickly, not trusting herself to speak just yet. There were so many emotions swirling inside her, and she wasn't sure how to express them. She had gone from being the girl no one saw to being claimed by the Alpha King himself. It was overwhelming. "I'm fine," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson's gaze softened, and he gave a small nod. He didn't push her to say more, which only made her feel more at ease. He seemed to understand her unspoken words, and that meant more than she could ever explain. The path ahead was quiet, the sounds of the pack's celebration slowly fading as they reached the edge of the temple grounds. The night was peaceful, but Emily knew that everything had changed. her life would never be the same again. "You're not alone anymore," Jackson's voice interrupted her thoughts again, and she turned to look at him, the sincerity in his eyes undeniable. "I will always be here for you, Emily." The promise in his words settled in her chest like a warm fire, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt the weight on her shoulders lift. For so long, she had carried the burden of loneliness, of being an outsider in a world that seemed to value power and dominance above all else. But Jackson had changed that. He had chosen her, not because of her status, but because of who she was. He saw her for the person she had always been, even when she couldn't see it in herself. "Thank you," Emily whispered, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. Jackson gave a small, reassuring smile, the corners of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. "You don't need to thank me," he said gently. "This is where you belong." They continued to walk in silence for a while, the peaceful night wrapping around them like a protective shield. Emily's mind was still racing, but it was different now. She wasn't lost anymore. She had a place, a purpose, and someone who cared. Jackson had given her that gift, and in return, she would give him everything she had. As they reached the edge of the temple grounds, Jackson stopped and turned to face her. "We have much to discuss," he said, his voice now serious, but not unkind. "But for now, all that matters is that you're safe." Emily nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. She didn't know what the future held, but with Jackson by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. I'm sure Emily thought she would never forget the moment Jackson had claimed her, but as the days passed, that feeling only grew stronger. It was like a new chapter of her life had begun, one where she was no longer an outsider, no longer someone who had to hide in the shadows. Jackson had made her feel seen, valued in a way no one ever had. The weight of loneliness that had followed her for years was finally lifted, and she could breathe without the constant ache of rejection. As they walked through the castle grounds together, Jackson's presence beside her felt like a shield. The pack, the world, and everything else seemed distant, irrelevant. She had found a place where she belonged. The morning light had just begun to touch the horizon when they reached the grand hall of the Blackwood Castle. The tall, imposing walls were adorned with banners that fluttered in the breeze, the scent of pine and fresh earth filling the air. Emily had only ever dreamed of entering the castle as a guest of honor, but now, it felt like it was her rightful place. Jackson led her inside, his hand gently resting on her back, guiding her through the great hall. The stone floors echoed with their footsteps, and the atmosphere was one of quiet elegance. The nobles and warriors of the pack stood in the corners, some offering polite nods, others stealing curious glances at Emily. She felt the eyes on her, but this time, it didn't bother her. She wasn't the girl who had been rejected anymore. She was the mate of the Alpha King, and that was all that mattered. As they reached the central hall, Jackson stopped and turned to face her. His piercing blue eyes held a depth that made her heart flutter. "There is much for us to discuss, Emily," he said, his voice low but filled with warmth. "But for now, I want you to know that you are safe here. Nothing will ever harm you while I'm around." His words settled over her like a blanket, calming the last of her lingering fears. Jackson had given her so much in such a short time, and she didn't know how to thank him for all he had done. "I'm not sure how to begin," Emily said, her voice soft. "Everything feels so new, so different." Jackson smiled, the corners of his mouth curving upward. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. We'll take this one step at a time." His reassurance eased her nerves, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like everything would be okay. The weight of the future, of the challenges that lay ahead, was still there, but now it didn't seem so heavy. They would face it together. And that was enough for her. Jackson gestured for her to follow him as they moved further into the heart of the castle. The walls were adorned with tapestries and artwork, each piece telling a story of the Blackwood family's legacy. Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she took it all in. The grandeur of it all was overwhelming, but it also felt like a world she could belong to. "This is our home now," Jackson said, breaking her reverie. "And I want you to feel as much a part of it as I do." Emily nodded, unable to find the words to express how much his words meant to her. She had never felt so at peace, so accepted. She had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. With Jackson by her side, everything felt possible. The world outside the castle was full of challenges, but Emily knew that she was no longer alone. Jackson was her mate, her protector, and together they would face whatever came their way. I'm not sure how much time passed as Emily wandered through the vast halls of Blackwood Castle, the weight of the moment still hanging heavily in her chest. Her mind was racing, overwhelmed by the changes that had unfolded so quickly. But despite everything, a sense of peace settled in her heart. She was no longer alone. Jackson was with her, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged. The castle was a world of its own, a place that seemed to hold centuries of history within its stone walls. Each room they passed seemed to tell a different story, a different chapter of the Blackwood family's legacy. Emily had always felt like an outsider, but now, in this ancient place, it was as if she had found her place in the grand scheme of things. Jackson had made sure she knew that she was welcome, that she was important to him and to his pack. They continued walking side by side, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Jackson had been quiet for a while, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "Are you settling in okay?" he asked, his voice warm with concern. Emily nodded, grateful for his attention. "I am. It's just a lot to take in." Jackson's smile widened slightly, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it all at once. Take your time. This castle, this life, it's yours now, too." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Emily had never felt so cared for, so seen. Jackson had given her a place in his world, a place that was filled with power and responsibility, but also warmth and affection. It was a world she never thought she would be a part of, but now, with him, it felt like it was meant to be. As they continued walking, they passed a large window that overlooked the gardens. The moonlight bathed everything in silver, casting long shadows across the sprawling grounds. Emily stopped for a moment, taking in the beauty of the scene. It was so different from the life she had known, so quiet, so peaceful. She had always dreamed of a place like this, but she never imagined she would find it. Jackson, noticing her pause, stopped beside her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, his voice soft. Emily nodded, her eyes never leaving the view. "It is. I never thought I'd be here, in a place like this." "You belong here," Jackson said simply. "You belong with me." Emily turned to look at him, her heart swelling with emotion. Jackson's eyes were filled with nothing but honesty, and for the first time in her life, Emily felt like she was where she was always meant to be. She wasn't a rejected Omega anymore. She was Jackson's mate, and that meant everything. As they stood there together, the quiet of the night wrapped around them like a protective blanket, Emily realized that, no matter what challenges they would face them together. And with Jackson by her side, she knew she could overcome anything. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed full of possibilities. Together, they could build something new, something strong, and Emily felt ready for whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with a sense of surreal calm. Emily had settled into the rhythm of her new life within the castle walls, and while it was all new and daunting, she couldn't deny the comfort of having Jackson by her side. The weight of her past had lifted, and although the future was still uncertain, there was something undeniable about the way she felt when she was with him. As the sun rose each morning, casting its golden light over the vast grounds of Blackwood Castle, Emily found herself in awe of the beauty that surrounded her. The gardens were lush, filled with vibrant flowers, and the towering trees seemed to whisper ancient secrets in the breeze. Jackson had given her this world, a world of safety, of peace, and of love. And yet, as much as she felt at home, there were moments when the reality of her new life would hit her all at once. There were responsibilities she had never anticipated, a role she was still learning to embrace. Emily was not just Jackson's mate, she was now the Luna of the pack, a title that came with its own expectations and challenges. "How are you feeling today?" Jackson's voice pulled her from her thoughts as she stood by the window in their chambers, watching the world outside. She turned to face him, offering him a soft smile. "I'm adjusting," she said, her voice steady. "It's just a lot to take in." Jackson walked over to her, his large frame filling the doorway, his presence both reassuring and commanding. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. "You're doing more than adjusting, Emily. You're thriving." She met his gaze, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "It's just so different from what I've known," she confessed. "I've always felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong. But here, with you, it's different." Jackson smiled, a rare softness in his expression. "You belong here, with me. This is your home now. Emily. You are not alone." His words wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed them. She had been surrounded by people all her life, yet she had never felt seen until now. Jackson had claimed her, not just as his mate but as his equal. And as much as she was still learning the ways of this new life, she felt a deep sense of pride in standing beside him. The responsibilities of being Luna were no small feat. Emily had been spending time with the women of the pack, learning the intricacies of managing the pack's affairs, from the daily needs of the warriors to the more delicate matters of diplomacy with neighboring packs. But Jackson had been by her side every step of the way, offering his guidance without pushing her too hard. "You're doing well," he said one evening as they sat together in the grand dining hall, enjoying a quiet meal. "I know it's overwhelming, but you've handled everything with grace." Emily looked down at her plate, feeling a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm not ready for all of this. I've never been a leader, never had the kind of power you have." Jackson reached across the table, his hand covering hers in a reassuring gesture. "You're stronger than you realize, Emily. Leadership isn't about power. It's about understanding, compassion, and knowing when to stand firm and when to listen. You have all of that. Trust me." His words gave her the courage to continue, even when doubt crept in. As they finished their meal, Jackson stood and extended his hand to her. "Come, let's take a walk," he said with a smile. "There's something I want to show you." Emily took his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch seep into her, and together they walked out into the night. The moonlight bathed the castle grounds in a soft glow, and as they walked side by side, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. She was no longer the girl who had been cast aside. She was not just Emily Hunter anymore, she was Emily Blackwood, and this was her home. And as she looked up at Jackson, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The night air was crisp as Emily and Jackson walked together through the castle grounds. The moon was full, casting a soft glow over the garden paths. Emily had grown accustomed to the quiet beauty of the castle, but tonight felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air. Jackson had been more reserved than usual, his expression thoughtful as they strolled side by side. Emily could sense that something was on his mind, something important. "Jackson, what's on your mind?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He turned to look at her, his blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I've been thinking a lot about our future," he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "I want to make sure that we are ready for whatever comes next." Emily stopped walking and looked up at him, her heart racing with both excitement and a hint of apprehension. "What do you mean?" she asked, feeling the weight of his words. Jackson smiled softly, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Being Luna is not just about standing by my side. It's about leading, making decisions, and guiding the pack. I know you're still adjusting, but I want you to feel like you're a part of everything we do here." His words touched her deeply, and for a moment, she felt overwhelmed. She had never thought of herself as a leader. But Jackson had always believed in her, and that belief made her want to rise to the occasion. "I'm still learning," she said, her voice steady but unsure. "But I want to be by your side, Jackson. I want to help lead, to make a difference." Jackson's smile grew, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. "You're already doing that," he whispered, his voice full of affection. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be yourself." His words, filled with such sincerity, soothed the doubts in her heart. She had always been afraid of not measuring up, but Jackson's belief in her made her feel like anything was possible. As they continued their walk, the path ahead seemed less daunting. The challenges of being Luna were real, but with Jackson by her side, Emily felt like she could face anything. They reached the edge of the garden, where the castle walls loomed tall and imposing. Jackson stopped and turned to her, his expression serious but filled with a quiet determination. "There is something else I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. Emily looked up at him, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" she asked, her heart beating a little faster. Jackson hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "The other packs are watching us. They're waiting to see how we will lead, how we will rule. They're looking for any sign of weakness, any reason to challenge us." Emily's stomach tightened at the thought. She had known that being with Jackson, being the Luna, came with great responsibility, but hearing the weight of it from him made it all feel so real. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. Jackson took her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "We stand together. We show them that we are strong, that we are united. As long as we have each other, nothing can break us." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had never felt more connected to him than she did right now. In this moment, standing side by side with Jackson, she knew they could face anything that came their way. Together, they were unstoppable. "We will be ready," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Jackson's eyes softened, and he leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I know we will," he replied. They stood there for a moment, the cool night air swirling around them, but it didn't matter. With Jackson by her side, Emily knew she had found her place, her purpose. And no matter what challenges the future held, she was ready to face them, not alone, but with him. Together, they would lead the pack into a new era, one built on strength, love, and unshakable trust. As the days passed, Emily settled more comfortably into her new life. The tension that had once gripped her chest began to ease, replaced by a sense of calm that she had never known. Being by Jackson's side, learning to navigate the intricacies of pack leadership, and facing the challenges of her new role as Luna, all felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. She had always feared that she would never be enough, that she would never measure up to the expectations placed on her. But Jackson's unwavering support gave her the strength to rise above her doubts. One morning, as they walked through the castle grounds, Emily could feel the cool breeze against her skin, the leaves rustling in the trees above them. It was a peaceful moment, the world around them calm, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. The peace she had come to cherish felt fragile, as though something was about to change. Jackson noticed her quiet demeanor and turned to her with a concerned look. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a warmth that always made her feel safe. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to express the unease she felt. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just, everything feels so calm, but I can't shake the feeling that something's coming. Something we can't control." Jackson stopped walking, turning to face her. His eyes were intense, his expression serious. "You're right," he said after a moment, his voice steady. "There's always a balance between peace and uncertainty in our world. There will always be challenges, but we face them together." Emily nodded, grateful for his words. She had come to understand that being with Jackson meant facing the unknown, but also knowing that she wasn't alone in it. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. They continued their walk, but the weight of Jackson's words lingered in the air. She knew that their bond, strong as it was, would be tested in ways she couldn't yet understand. The pack, the kingdom, and the world outside the castle were waiting to see how they would lead. The responsibility was heavy, but it was one she was beginning to accept. Later that evening, as they sat together in the grand hall, Emily's mind continued to race. The weight of her thoughts was evident, and Jackson noticed. "Emily," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "Whatever happens, I need you to trust in yourself. You have everything within you to lead, to protect, and to fight for our pack. You're stronger than you realize." Emily looked at him, feeling the sincerity in his words. He had always believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. "I want to be strong, Jackson," she said quietly. "For you, for our pack. I just don't know if I'm ready for all of it." Jackson reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was reassuring, grounding her in the moment. You don't have to be ready for everything right now. One step at a time. I'll be with you through every challenge, every decision. His words brought a sense of peace to her heart, calming the storm of uncertainty that had taken root in her mind. As they sat there, surrounded by the quiet of the castle, Emily knew that she was no longer the girl who had once felt invisible. She was Jackson's mate, the Luna of the Blackwood Pack, and though the road ahead would be difficult, she was ready to face it. Together, they would lead with strength, with love, and with the unshakable belief that they could overcome anything. As the weeks went by, Emily found herself growing more confident in her role as Luna. With Jackson's constant support, she was beginning to find her footing in the pack. The responsibilities of being a leader were heavy, but with each decision, she felt herself becoming more capable, more in tune with the needs of the pack. Jackson continued to guide her, but it was clear that he trusted her judgment, and that made all the difference. One morning, as Emily walked through the castle gardens, the sun shining down on the dew-covered flowers, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She had once been an outsider, overlooked and discarded, but now she was standing at the heart of the Blackwood Pack, by Jackson's side. The path ahead still had its uncertainties, but she no longer felt lost. Jackson was beside her, and that gave her the strength to face whatever challenges might come. As she walked, she noticed Jackson approaching from a distance, his broad shoulders and confident stride unmistakable. He met her with a warm smile, his eyes filled with pride and something deeper. You look like you've been deep in thought, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Emily smiled, feeling the familiar warmth that his presence brought. I've been thinking about everything, she replied. How much has changed, how much I've changed. Jackson walked closer, his hand gently brushing against hers. You've always had the strength, Emily. You just needed to see it in yourself. His words were simple, but they meant the world to her. She had doubted herself for so long. Had believed that she wasn't enough. But Jackson had always believed in her, even when she couldn't see it. And now, she was beginning to believe in herself, too. I never imagined I'd be here, Emily said, her voice soft but steady. I never imagined I'd be leading beside you, making decisions for the pack. Jackson's eyes softened, and he took her hand in his. You were always meant to be here, Emily. You're not just my mate, you're my partner in everything. His words filled her with warmth, and she couldn't help but smile. For the first time in her life, she truly felt like she belonged. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. And we'll face everything together. No matter what challenges come, we will face them side by side. Emily nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She had found her place in the world, and it was with Jackson. Together, she repeated, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. As they stood there, hand in hand, the weight of the world didn't feel so heavy anymore. With Jackson by her side, she knew she could handle whatever came their way. They were a team, bound by love, strength, and a shared purpose. And as they walked back to the castle, ready to face the responsibilities that awaited them, Emily felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. The future was still unknown, but with Jackson by her side, she knew she was ready for anything.